the day I planned to reveal my true identity to my girlfriend. I overheard her chatting in French with her best friend. Her friend asked, "If you marry Makoto, what about George?" She replied, "Even though I'll marry Makoto, the one I love will always be George." They laughed, thinking I was just a poor, clueless guy who couldn't understand French. Little did they know that I was the heir to the richest family in City A and fluent in several languages. My disguise as a penniless commoner was merely an experiment to experience life. Chapter 1. Mom, Dad, I've made my decision. I'm ready to return and take over the family business, I said. Hearing my words, my parents were thrilled, but recalling the girlfriend I'd been keeping secrets from, they couldn't help but ask, "Is your girlfriend coming with you? You haven't told her the truth yet, have you?" "No, she's not coming. I'm breaking up with her," I said. Mentioning Anna made my voice drop a little. "I'll wrap everything up here within a week." After a few more words, I hung up, put away my phone, and returned to the private room. The room was noisy and crowded, but the chatter paused for a moment as I walked in. Acting as if I hadn't noticed, I went straight to Anna's side and sat down. She looked up from her conversation, casting a curious glance at me. "George, what kind of call takes so long?" she asked. Before I could answer, another voice interrupted, speaking in French. "Anna, when are you and Makoto planning to get married?" Hearing this, I tightened my grip on my glass until my knuckles turned white. Anna, however, remained indifferent. She glanced at me before responding in French. "The date my family picked, half a month from now." At her words, everyone in the room turned to look at me. One of her friends raised an eyebrow, her tone laced with curiosity. "If you're marrying Makoto, what about George? Breaking up?" Anna shook her head and replied, "No." She swirled her wine glass gently, took a small sip, and continued, "Marriage is just to satisfy my family. George is the only one I truly love." Her words brought a chorus of laughter to the room. The banter flew fast and loose, with someone commenting, "Anna, are you really serious? Loving someone so far beneath your station?" Anna turned her gaze toward me, her eyes brimming with tenderness and affection. As if her silence was answer enough, another voice chimed in, teasing, "You must be truly smitten. But hey, does he really not understand French?" The question was meant as a joke, but it made everyone laugh. "George's family is struggling. Where would he get the money to learn a foreign language?" "Relax. He definitely doesn't understand." Their mockery filled the room, oblivious to the fact that my breath had quickened and my grip on the glass had turned my knuckles white. I didn't tell them I understood every word. After all, I wasn't the penniless nobody they thought I was. I was the only heir to the wealthiest family in the world. Anna and I had been together for 5 years. She treated me well, except for one thing: she never introduced me to her family. I'd assumed she was worried about our difference in status. After all, the Lee family was one of the most prominent in City B. I'd long planned to tell her the truth, that I was the sole heir to a massive fortune, merely concealing my identity to avoid living under my parents' shadow. But fate had other plans. 3 days ago, I stumbled upon a red wedding invitation in her study. The groom was the heir to the Ito family. The bride was Anna. While whispering sweet nothings to me, she had already accepted an arranged marriage. She called me her husband one moment and prepared to marry someone of her family's choosing the next. In that instant, I realized there was nothing left to say. She would get married. I would inherit my legacy. Both of us would have bright futures, but separately. As the evening wound down and everyone prepared to leave, I followed behind the group, silent. I'd barely stepped out of the room when a stranger's voice called out from behind me, "Young Master Wang." Chapter 2. I froze for a moment and turned around, realizing that the person calling me was a former business partner who had always sought collaboration with my father. I sighed inwardly, not wanting to reveal my identity. I was contemplating how to brush it off when one of Anna's friends behind her gave me a once-over and let out a mocking laugh. "Young Master George, with his clothes. Do you think he's wearing anything worth over $300 altogether? What a ridiculous joke." Her words provoked a burst of laughter. They weren't speaking in French, so I heard every word of their mockery, but I showed no reaction. Instead, Anna grew angry, giving the person a cold, warning glance. The woman faltered, feeling embarrassed, and the others quickly fell silent after receiving the same warning look. With the laughter fading, the person didn't follow us. I trailed behind Anna silently as we returned home. Once home, she took off her coat and hung it on the rack before breaking the silence. "I won't bring you to these kinds of gatherings anymore," she said. My tone and expression remained calm. Even though this was essentially a dismissal from her social circle, I didn't show any reaction. I merely asked, "Do you think I embarrassed you?" She chuckled lightly and, intending to tease me, tried to snuggle into my arms. But I sidestepped her, forcing her to explain with a hint of helplessness. "What are you thinking? I just don't want you to feel hurt," I replied. "But there's a gap between our statuses. Situations like this will keep happening. Hasn't your family pressured you to enter an arranged marriage?" I looked at her, searching for a flicker of guilt in her expression. Even at the mention of arranged marriage, Anna's expression only froze for a moment before reverting to normal. "George, you only need to know that I love you. I'll handle the rest," she said. Had I not been watching closely, I wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. After speaking, Anna went to the bathroom to freshen up. Watching her leave, I stayed silent, though my thoughts churned. Was her so-called solution to marry someone her family approved of while keeping a relationship with me on the side? From the bedside table, a notification pinged. It was Anna's phone. Her password had never been a secret to me, so I unlocked it easily and glanced at the message. It was from Makoto. He wrote, "Anna, we're meeting both families tomorrow. If you don't stay over tonight, won't the elders suspect our marriage is fake? I know you love your boyfriend, but at least for these few days, could you give me some dignity?" Though his words were meek, I saw his intent clearly. He began by using their parents as an excuse to make her stay. What would come next? He'd only escalate, step by step, but none of this concerned me anymore. I'd already decided to leave. With that in mind, I marked the message as unread and returned the phone to its place. Shortly after, Anna emerged from the bathroom, picked up her phone, and glanced at it. The next second, she looked at me apologetically. "George, there's an urgent matter at work I need to handle. I won't be home tonight. Get some rest." "Okay." She left in a rush, too preoccupied to notice my lack of response or that I didn't protest as I had in the past. Instead of sending her off while grumbling about wanting more time together, I watched her walk away in silence. Not long after she left, my phone pinged with a new message. "Anna will come to me with just a word. Tomorrow we're meeting the parents. Once we're married, what will you be? Just a hidden lover?" Makoto's words stung, but what angered me most was that Anna had handed him the knife he used to hurt me. She might not realize it, but even if I hadn't found the wedding invitation, her plans to marry someone else wouldn't have stayed hidden. The day after I discovered the invitation, Makoto added me as a friend. Since then, he'd been sending me taunting messages. There were photos of Anna helping Makoto try on wedding outfits, of them picking out rings, of them visiting the wedding venue. One picture after another shattered any remaining affection I had for Anna. That night, Anna didn't come home, and I didn't care. The next morning, after a quick wash, I went straight to my office and resigned. By lunchtime, my resignation was finalized. During my break, I had lunch with some colleagues downstairs. When I mentioned my resignation, one of them, who was closer to me, joked, "Lately, I've been seeing videos about people quitting to inherit family businesses." "George, did you quit so suddenly because you're going to inherit a family fortune too?" I nodded slightly and said, "That's right, I'm going to inherit the family business." They froze for a moment before bursting into laughter, thinking I was joking. I smiled but didn't elaborate. After lunch, I packed my belongings into a box and went straight home. When I arrived, Anna was there. Seeing me with the box, she asked curiously, "Did you quit?" I nodded and carried the box to the bedroom. Her brows furrowed tightly as she called out, "You loved that job. Why did you suddenly quit?" I paused, looked at her, and smiled. "Because I've found something I want to do even more." Chapter 3. Hearing my response, Anna didn't ask further. She simply said, "If the work is too tiring, just come back. Seeing you work so hard every day breaks my heart." "George, we have enough money in our family to support the both of us." I shook my head and replied firmly, "I'm not a freeloader." Anna was taken aback. "How could you ever be?" I cut her off, not wanting to hear more. "Why are you home so early today? Didn't go to work?" She said, "Work's been so busy lately that I haven't had time to spend with you. I wanted to make time for us today." Her frown softened, and she quickly became the sweet, doting girlfriend I'd always known. "What do you want to do? Shall we have dinner or watch a movie?" In the past, such words would have moved me deeply. After all, I knew she was the heir to the Lee Corporation, constantly juggling a mountain of work. Her willingness to carve out time for me once proved how important I was to her. But now, as I looked at her, I couldn't help but wonder, was she really busy with work, or was it the preparations for her wedding that kept her occupied? How could she reconcile planning a wedding with another man while still claiming that I was the only one she loved? Ultimately, I didn't expose her lies. There were only a few days left. Soon, I would disappear from her life entirely. I shook my head to decline her suggestion and thought for a moment before saying, "How about helping me with some spring cleaning? There are a lot of old things in the villa that we don't need anymore." Anna agreed, and we spent a long time sorting through items. By the end, the things I had gathered for disposal were all items we had once purchased as a couple. From mugs to accessories, clothes to slippers, all were thrown into the trash without hesitation. As the pile of discarded couples' items grew, the smile on her face began to falter. By the time I threw the last item into the bin, her unease was unmistakable. "George, did you find out something?" she asked nervously. "What could I know? Is there something you're hiding from me?" I raised an eyebrow, avoiding her question with one of my own. She averted her gaze, unable to meet my eyes. After a moment of silence, she grasped my hand tightly. "George, No matter what happens, just remember, I love you. I smiled faintly but said nothing more. After finishing the cleaning, Anna insisted on going out for a date. Fearing she might sense something was amiss, I didn't refuse. We had dinner, watched a movie, and eventually arrived at an auction house. Just as we were about to enter, a man in a sharp suit approached us. Anna's expression flickered for a split second, and I noticed immediately. What's wrong? Did you run into someone you know? I asked. Before she could respond, the man stopped in front of us, greeting us warmly. Anna quickly introduced him. This is Makoto, the son of a family friend, she said. Then, after a brief pause, she introduced me. And this is my boyfriend, George. The stark contrast in her introductions made Makoto's smile falter, though he quickly recovered and extended a hand toward me. I've heard a lot about you, Anna's boyfriend. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, he said. Before I could respond, the group of friends who had mocked me in French the day before appeared, winking at Anna behind my back. It was then I realized this coincidence had been orchestrated. They had brought Makoto here on purpose. Anger flared within me, but I knew losing my temper now would only make things worse. I had no choice but to suppress my rage. At the auction, Makoto's seat was right next to Anna's. Unlike his provocative texts, in person he was charming and knowledgeable. When he learned of Anna's interest in porcelain, he engaged her in animated conversation. Anna, who had been distant at first, gradually leaned closer to him. It wasn't until I coughed that Anna seemed to remember my presence. She turned to me with a soft voice, saying, "Are you bored, George? I know you're not interested in these things. If there's anything you like, just bid for it." Before I could reply, the hushed whispers of her friends behind me reached my ears. Though they tried to keep their voices low, we were only separated by one row of seats, and I could hear every word. Anna sure knows how to save face for George. Even if he's interested, what does it matter? He probably doesn't even know how to place a bid. Ha! Exactly. This must be his first time at a high society auction. Chapter 4. The women continued their mocking chatter, occasionally glancing in my direction. Although they pretended to whisper, it felt like they were deliberately speaking loud enough for me to hear. I didn't react. Soon enough, they'd be standing respectfully before me, addressing me as young Master Wang. As the previous item was sold, the next piece was brought to the stage, a jade sculpture of longevity cranes and pine trees. The quality of the jade was exceptional, and the auctioneer introduced it as a work by the renowned Chan, the Grand Master of Jade Sculpting. Makoto's excitement was immediate. Raising his bidding paddle, he turned to Anna. "This piece is invaluable. Anna, your grandmother's birthday is coming up. This would be the perfect gift for her." Hearing the name, Chan, I instinctively glanced at the sculpture. One look was enough to tell me all I needed. My voice was calm as I said, "It's fake." Makoto turned to me, disbelief etched on his face. He wanted to retort, to call me a clueless bumpkin, but with Anna seated beside him, he forced a smile. "And how, Mr. Wang, did you come to that conclusion?" "Because the real one was gifted to his grandmother by the Wang family heir," I said plainly. "There is only one such sculpture in the world. The genuine piece resides in my family's collection, which makes the one on stage undoubtedly fake." Though my intention was to save him from making a mistake, my words had the opposite effect. Makoto burst into laughter, and Anna's friends joined in, ridiculing me openly. "George, stop pretending to know what you're talking about. It's embarrassing." One sneered. "Right, so, the real piece was gifted by the Wang family heir. What? Did you crawl under their table and see it yourself? Just because your last name is Wang doesn't mean you're related to them." Their jeering grew louder, only stopping when Anna shot them a cold look. She turned to me, holding my hand as she spoke gently. "George, I know you've been reading books on art appraisal lately, but expertise doesn't come from books alone. Makoto grew up attending auctions and has a deep understanding of jade carving. Naturally, he knows more than you." Her tone was measured, but her words carried the same disbelief as the others. I chuckled softly but said nothing. In the end, Makoto bid an exorbitant 100 million yuan to secure the jade sculpture. As he swiped his card, I couldn't help but smile. I wondered how Anna's grandmother would react when she learned that her family had spent 100 million on a counterfeit sculpture. I didn't stop him or concern myself with it further. Rising from my seat, I excused myself to the restroom. As I washed my hands, a familiar voice sounded behind me. "George, I thought I made myself clear, yet here you are, shamelessly clinging on. Do you really want to be the third wheel that badly?" The voice was sharp and grating, a far cry from the composed, polished Makoto from earlier. I raised my gaze and turned to face him. "Mr. Ito, let's get one thing straight. I've been with her for 5 years. If anyone's the third wheel here, it's certainly not me." With that, I prepared to leave, but he stepped forward, blocking my path, a cold sneer on his face. "Yes, 5 years, he mocked. "And yet she still won't marry you. Haven't you ever wondered why? I'm the heir to the Ito family, and she's the heir to the Lee Corporation. We're a perfect match. But you, a father who gambles, A sick mother. A broken-down family with nothing to offer. What makes you think you're worthy of her? I froze briefly. That backstory was something I had fabricated myself, but it surprised me that Anna had shared it with Makoto. I chuckled bitterly, imagining that if my circumstances were truly as pitiful as I'd pretended, Anna would have handed him yet another weapon to wound me. You're right, I said with a faint smile. You're the perfect match. I wish you both the best. With those words, I stepped past him and walked away. Moments later, my phone rang. It was my mother. George, you need to hurry back. Everyone is waiting for you, and we've prepared so many gifts for your return. She gushed. Your father and I bought you a castle overseas. Your aunt got you a diamond watch once worn by a British king. And your uncle, he's filled an entire garage with luxury cars for you. Listening to her rattle off the family's extravagant preparations, I couldn't help but shake my head. Mom, I'm coming back to inherit the family business, not to bankrupt it. Just as I finished speaking, a familiar voice sounded from behind me. What family inheritance? Chapter 5. I froze for a moment, instinctively ending the call. I couldn't help but wonder why so many people loved sneaking up behind others to speak unexpectedly. Turning around, I saw Anna's less than pleasant expression. After a brief pause, I explained. It's nothing. My old colleagues asked what I'd do after resigning, so I joked about going home to inherit the family business. Anna frowned slightly. I wasn't someone who usually joked about such things. She seemed to sense something was off and was about to speak when I stepped forward, calling back to her. Coming? There are still a few jewelry pieces left to showcase. Hearing this, Anna assumed I was interested in buying some antiques, so she nodded and followed me back to the auction. Once seated, Anna bid on several high-value antique items. After winning, she had them packed and handed over to me. I looked at the boxes in my hands and said softly, I don't need these things. Anna hugged me with a smile. You'll get used to it. Don't worry about wasting money. I'll buy you treasures for the rest of our lives. I opened my mouth but ultimately didn't say what I wanted to. I didn't need these cheap trinkets. My collection was priceless. As the auction concluded and attendees began to leave, Anna and I, along with the others, prepared to head out. Everyone had driven separately, so we could have just gone our separate ways. But as soon as Anna and I got into the car, Makoto appeared, tapping on the passenger side window. The window rolled down, and he no longer carried the sharp, mocking tone he'd used in the restroom earlier. Anna, my car broke down. Could you give me a ride home? He asked with a smile. Anna frowned, about to decline when Makoto quickly added, your parents did ask me to look after you and spend more time with you, didn't they? You haven't forgotten, have you? Anna's expression darkened slightly. After a moment's hesitation, she reluctantly agreed. Makoto's smile widened, and he pushed further. But I get carsick and can't sit in the back. What should we do? Anna glanced at me, about to speak, but I had already opened the door and moved to the back seat. The fluidity of my movements left her momentarily stunned. By the time she reacted, I was already seated in the back, my eyes closed as if preparing to rest. Anna's words caught in her throat, leaving her visibly uncomfortable. She wanted to say it was just a seat and not worth fussing over, but as she glanced at me in the rearview mirror, I had already shut my eyes. Makoto climbed into the passenger seat, closing the door with a triumphant smile. In his mind, he thought, George, even if she likes you now, so what? Everything I want will eventually be mine, including her heart. It's only a matter of time. Feeling smug, his tone was unusually soft as he said, Mr. Wang seems tired. Let him rest for a while. Perhaps sensing my mood, Anna didn't converse much with Makoto. She nodded silently and started the car. At some point, I genuinely fell asleep. When I woke up, the car was parked in the Lee family's garage, and Makoto was nowhere to be seen. Anna touched my face gently. You're awake. You seem to be sleeping so soundly. I didn't want to disturb you. Still groggy, I nodded and opened the car door, stepping out without waiting for her. I walked straight toward the house. Anna quickly got out and caught up with me at the door, blocking my path. Are you upset? Makoto really is just a family friend's son. Don't overthink it, she said. I gave a nonchalant hum, assuming I was still angry. Anna grabbed my hand, her tone soft. He really is just a family friend. Darling, you know you're the only one I love. She seemed to remember that it had been a while since we'd been intimate. Just as she leaned in to kiss me, I pushed her away. Her shocked expression lingered in my mind as I entered the house. I'm not feeling well. I'll rest in the bedroom, I said, locking the door behind me, ensuring she couldn't follow. The next morning, we sat in the dining room, having breakfast. My phone buzzed, a reminder alarm I had set long ago. The note read, meeting the parents. Anna saw the message too. This was part of my original plan to reveal my true identity. I'd suggested that she meet my parents, and she had agreed. Our eyes met, and I was thinking of how to cancel the meeting when her phone rang. It was Makoto. Whatever he said made her expression shift slightly. She turned to me with an apologetic look. George, something urgent came up. Can we reschedule meeting your parents for another time? She asked, Chapter 6. I thought Anna might expect me to be upset, but I simply nodded calmly and said, "That works. I have something to take care of today as well." After she left, I headed out too. I went to a mall and bought gifts for the friends I was meeting later. When we met up, everyone unwrapped their boxes, and the sight of brand new luxury items inside elicited gasps of astonishment. "George, where did you get these? They're so authentic." "They are authentic," I replied with a laugh, amused by their disbelief. As they marveled over the gifts, I decided it was time to come clean. The truth is, my backstory about having a gambling father and a sick mother was fabricated. My real identity is that of the sole heir to the wealthiest family. I'm here today to say goodbye because I'm heading home to take over the family business. Their reactions were a mix of shock, amazement, and eventually, pure excitement. They erupted in cheers, calling me young master with a fervor that could have lifted the ceiling off the restaurant. Amidst the celebration, someone brought up Anna. "But what about Anna? Does she know your true identity?" The mention of her made my smile fade slightly. "She's planning to marry someone else," I said. "What? No way." My friends were incredulous. "Anna, the girl we all thought was the epitome of loyalty and devotion." "Exactly. 3 years ago, when you mentioned liking the night blooming Sirius, she bought out every specimen worldwide just to make you smile. 2 years ago, when you had the flu, she canceled billion-dollar deals to fly back and personally take care of you, staying up all night. And then there was last year's car accident. The truck was heading straight for you, and she swerved the car to shield you, breaking 3 ribs in the process. She spent 3 months in the hospital, nearly losing her life. How could her groom not be you?" Hearing them recount those moments left me nostalgic. Back then, Anna's love for me had been all-encompassing, even to the point of self-sacrifice. But now, I shook my head and smiled faintly. "She does love me, but her family thinks I'm beneath her. They're forcing her into marriage." Before I had the chance to reveal the truth, the invitations were already printed. "From what I can gather, her plan is to make me her lover after the wedding." My friends exploded with outrage. "A lover? Are you kidding me? Making the sole heir to the wealthiest family a lover? The Lee family must be insane. She'll regret this. Just wait until she's chasing after him, begging for forgiveness." Another chimed in. "Exactly. Once they learn who you are and realize you left quietly, they'll lose their minds." At that moment, Anna and Makoto walked through the door, overhearing the tail end of our conversation. Anna frowned and asked, "What do you mean by true identity?" Seeing them approach, one of my friends, filled with indignation, was about to speak when I stopped him. I turned to face the pair, my expression cold. "What are you doing here?" Anna's gaze flickered with unease as she avoided eye contact. "Our families have a collaboration, so we arranged to meet and discuss it," she said, her voice uncertain. Her answer made me laugh softly. Of course, I knew the collaboration she was referring to. It was their marriage arrangement. Because of their business discussion, Anna and Makoto didn't join us. Instead, they sat at a nearby table, close enough for me to see every intimate gesture exchanged between them. I watched as he cut her steak, shared his favorite dishes with her, handed her napkins, and even wiped a smudge from her lips. Their interaction was so natural and familiar that my friends fumed with anger, but I remained calm, my expression impassive. Chapter 7. After finishing the meal, we all parted ways, and Anna suggested we head home with Makoto. Perhaps learning from the previous incident where we argued over the front seat, Anna decided this time to take the family's extended Rolls-Royce, with the chauffeur driving, so she wouldn't need to sit in the front passenger seat again. The car smoothly headed toward the Ito family's house. The journey was uneventful, with the road ahead clear. No one expected an accident to occur at that moment. A runaway truck came hurtling toward us from another direction. The driver instinctively swerved the steering wheel, but the sound of a loud crash followed as the two vehicles collided. As the windows shattered, I was thrown toward the opposite side due to the force. Just before I lost consciousness, I saw Anna protect Makoto beside her, shielding him from harm and soothing his panic. My vision blurred, and I suddenly remembered the car accident my friends had mentioned earlier. It was during our 4th year together. My feelings for her were still at their most intense. At that very intersection, a truck came speeding toward us. Just like this one, I was facing the truck's path. In a moment of fear, Anna realized she couldn't avoid the collision. She swerved the car, forcing her side to face the truck. The front of the car was crushed in, and she was pinned in the driver's seat. Firefighters and doctors worked tirelessly to rescue her, and it took hours to get her out of the car. She nearly died that day, but when she woke up from the danger, the first thing she asked was about my safety. Now, in the same kind of accident, the difference was that she instinctively shielded Makoto, not me. The rear of the extended Rolls-Royce was completely mangled, and after everyone had gotten out of the car, Anna, still calming Makoto, finally noticed me. I was silently holding my bleeding forehead, but luckily my injury wasn't severe. After some treatment at the hospital, the doctor advised me to stay for observation for 2 days, just because the injury was to my head. Anna, seeing the bandages on my head, looked at me with deep guilt. George, I'm so sorry. I was just thinking about the upcoming collaboration with Makoto, and he couldn't get injured. I only thought about protecting him. You can hit me, shout at me, whatever you want. Just don't ignore me, okay? Her apology was sincere, and her reasoning seemed understandable if I hadn't remembered their wedding, which was just a few weeks away. I didn't respond. I didn't say I forgave her, nor did I say I wouldn't forgive her. My expression remained emotionless throughout. Anna's apologies continued as she kept repeating how sorry she was. Suddenly, her eyes seemed to brighten with hope, and she said, "Your birthday is coming up in a few days. Can I give you your gift in advance? What do you want for your birthday? I'll get it for you." Hearing this, I finally looked up at her, my eyes still emotionless. "Then get me a plane ticket to City A, 3 days from now," she asked. "City A, what for?" She seemed surprised, but quickly answered her own question. "Do you want to travel there?" I didn't explain. I simply nodded and murmured, Anna didn't ask more questions. She opened her phone and bought the plane ticket to City A right in front of me. Afterward, she said, "I have something to do during this time, so I won't be able to accompany you. You go to City A first, and when I'm free, I'll join you. The plane ticket is a small gift, but I'll make it up to you with a big surprise later." I shook my head and smiled softly. "It's not small. Not small at all. After all, this plane ticket was the way home for me. Anna, thank you for your gift. You're personally sending me home." Chapter 8. During my 2 days in the hospital, Anna seemed to return to the attentive and loving girlfriend she had been when we first started dating. But this illusion ended the moment I was discharged. She claimed she had work to attend to and arranged for the driver to take me home. Not long after, I received a taunting message from Makoto. "Sorry, Anna and I are about to get married. She's accompanying me to my family's estate for dinner today, so I'm afraid she doesn't have time to pick you up." I ignored the message and quietly returned home to start packing my luggage. On the day of my departure, I woke up early. 7 hours before my flight, I began carrying my suitcases out the door. Just as I was finishing, Anna returned. Seeing the pile of suitcases at the entrance, her face immediately betrayed a flicker of panic. "What's going on?" she asked. "I told you I was going to City A, didn't I? You even bought the ticket for me. Did you forget?" I replied, my expression calm, as if I were merely planning a vacation. But my explanation didn't convince her. She asked, "Wasn't it just for a day or two? Do you really need this much luggage?" I curved my lips into a faint smile and said, "I brought extra clothes. I want to take more pictures this time." She knew I'd never cared much for photos before. Even when we traveled together, I never brought this much. Her unease grew, spreading through her like a wildfire. She looked as though she wanted to open my suitcases right then and there to check if I was telling the truth. But just as she moved to do so, her phone rang, cutting through the tension. It was Makoto. Whatever he said on the other end made her pause momentarily. Then, without another word, she left. Before she did, she turned back to me and said, "George, don't stay too long. Send me your return flight details, and I'll pick you up." I didn't answer because I knew I wasn't coming back. This departure was our final goodbye. 5 hours before my flight, I changed the villa's door code. From my birthday, I reset it to Makoto's. I left a sticky note on the door that read, "Since this will soon be Mr. Ito's home, it's only fitting the code should be set to his birthday." 3 hours before my flight, I gathered every photo of Anna and me from the villa. I burned them one by one in the fire pit. I remembered the kisses we shared beneath fireworks, the countless times I told her she was mine. I remembered confessing my love under starlit skies, swearing to love her for all eternity. She once took the brunt of a car accident to protect me, breaking 3 ribs. Her social media was filled with pictures of us. We walked through spring, summer, autumn, and winter together. Now, as the memories turned to ashes, it was all over. 2 hours before my flight, my phone buzzed. Makoto had sent me a video. In the video, a family gathering was underway. Anna's friends, Makoto's brothers, and their parents were all present. The camera focused on Anna and Makoto as the crowd cheered. "Kiss, kiss." Someone teased, "Come on, Anna, you're getting married in a few days. What's there to be shy about?" Makoto, his cheeks flushed, closed his eyes and leaned toward her. The cheers grew louder as everyone egged Anna on to kiss him. Anna hesitated, staring at him for a long moment before finally closing her eyes. She wrapped her arms around his neck and stood on tiptoe. The video ended, and another message from Makoto followed. "See that? I'm the husband the Lee family has chosen for her. With your pathetic family background, you're no match for the Lee family. You'd be lucky to marry a beggar, let alone Anna. Even if Anna loves you, her defenses are crumbling. First, she met my family. Then, she moved in with me. And just now, she kissed me. Tell me, how much longer before she's in my bed?" I didn't reply. Instead, I printed every mocking message he'd sent me over the past few days. I stacked them neatly in the empty living room. 1 hour before my flight, I added one final message to the top of the stack. Anna, congratulations on your wedding. We're done. Then, I dragged my suitcases out of the villa, hailed a cab, and sped toward the airport. Anna, from this moment on, I will return to being the heir of the wealthiest family. You and I are done. Chapter 9. At the airport in City A, I stepped out dragging my suitcase. A sleek Bugatti, clearly worth a fortune, was already waiting outside. As soon as I approached, a man standing by the car opened the door for me and said, "Young master, please get in." As my luggage was loaded into the car, I settled into my seat and naturally began chatting with the man in the driver's seat. "Martin, why are you here to pick me up? Where's the family driver?" Martin chuckled, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes adding a touch of warmth to his expression. The car smoothly merged into traffic as he replied, "It's been years since you've been back, young master. When I heard you were returning today, I volunteered to take the job myself." I smiled and teased, "Looks like you missed me." Martin, with a light laugh. I shifted the topic. "How have my parents been all these years?" Martin had served as the Wang family's butler for decades, practically raising me. To me, he felt more like family than an employee, and our relationship was never distant. He didn't deny my playful remark, instead nodding with a smile. "I did miss you. Master and Madam are doing well. They're healthy and happy, though they've missed you terribly. That's about all there is." We chatted along the way, and by the time the car pulled up in front of the Wang family villa, I had a good idea of how things had been at home during my absence. I stepped out of the car and headed straight to the villa. The moment I opened the door, a row of servants stationed by the entrance greeted me in unison, their movements and voices perfectly synchronized. "Welcome home, young master." I couldn't help but rub my forehead in mild exasperation. Martin, pushing my suitcase behind me, handed it off to the servants, who promptly carried it upstairs. Noticing my expression, Martin chuckled and said, "Master and Madam are sticklers for ceremony. When they heard you were coming back, they trained the staff overnight to prepare this welcome. They're all waiting for you in the living room now." I nodded, finding the whole ordeal a bit over the top but refrained from saying anything that might dampen the mood. Instead, I made my way directly to the living room. As expected, it was packed with people, my parents, aunts, and uncles, all gathered in one place. I greeted everyone individually before sitting beside my parents. Their concerned expressions pierced through my usual composure, stirring an unexpected wave of emotion within me. A sense of frustration welled up, difficult to articulate. I'd been doted on by my family all my life, never having to endure any hardship. That was until I decided to hide my identity and venture to City B for personal growth. There, I met Anna. During our 5 years together, I gave her my whole heart, truly believing we would spend our lives together. I was so confident we'd be each other's one and only. But in the end, I nearly became her secret lover without even realizing it. My devotion had been for nothing. Noticing my mood, my mother placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "What's done is done. The past is the past. The one thing our family doesn't fear is making mistakes. When things fall apart, we start over. We're never short on second chances." Her reassurance eased my frustration. The others, noticing the shift, quickly changed the subject, bringing out the gifts they'd prepared for me. I soon realized my mother's earlier phone call had been anything but exaggerated. It had actually been understated. Property deeds, keys, and other gifts filled the table. At the center was a stunning diamond watch crafted from gold and adorned with massive, glittering diamonds, every detail exuding luxury and value. Yet they still seemed unsatisfied, intent on covering every inch of the table with gifts. Just as I was about to tell them it was unnecessary, my aunt clapped her hands on the table, her eyes lighting up as she exclaimed, "George just got out of a relationship, didn't he? Perfect timing. I have a friend whose daughter recently returned from abroad. My friend's been fretting about her not dating. Why don't you two meet? It could be just as friends at first." Chapter 10. I was momentarily stunned and quickly waved my hands, declining my aunt's suggestion. But she ignored my refusal and handed me a contact on her phone. "She's a lovely girl. I met her before she went abroad. She's stunning. Even if there's no romantic connection, she'd make a great friend," my aunt insisted. Unable to turn down her enthusiastic proposal, I eventually agreed. What I didn't expect was that when I opened the contact she shared, I realized I was already friends with this person on my phone. I tapped into her profile, a simple black moon icon against a dark background and a minimal nickname consisting of just 2 letters. Puzzled, I tried to recall how and when I'd added her as a contact, but nothing came to mind. I didn't ask. Quietly, I turned off my phone screen, deciding that whatever answers I sought would come naturally when we met. While I was preparing for this meeting, Anna finally returned home. It was already dark, and the villa was shrouded in shadows. The lights were off, and Anna didn't notice the note stuck to the door. She entered her usual password and pushed the door, only to find it wouldn't open. Confused, she looked up and noticed the note for the first time. Written on it were the words, "Since this will soon be Mr. Ito's home, it's only fitting the code should be set to his birthday. Ito's home, Makoto. Her heart skipped a beat, a growing unease spreading through her chest. Could George have found out? But how? She and Makoto had only met once, and no one else would have told him about the engagement. Where could he have learned that she was planning to marry Makoto? Hesitant, she entered Makoto's birthday as the code. The door unlocked immediately. Turning on the lights, she saw that the villa was empty. Instinctively, she called out, "George?" Her voice echoed through the house, but no reply came. Then she remembered that George had gone to City A 2 days ago. He rarely left her for long. Most of the time, he was at home, waiting for her to return. Ever since they moved in together, this was the first time he hadn't been home when she came back. A sinking feeling weighed on her chest. Could he really be serious about leaving? But then she dismissed the thought. That's impossible, she told herself. George loved her so much. He was probably just upset that she hadn't spent much time with him lately. Maybe he'd guessed something about her and Makoto and was sulking. But he would eventually come back. She would apologize, and everything would be fine. Determined, she bit her lip and walked toward the living room. She decided she'd call George later to ask when he would return so they could talk things through. But as she reached the living room, her eyes fell on a stack of papers sitting on the table. Her steps quickened, and she sat on the couch, picking up the papers with curiosity. In her heart, she hoped they were from George, a note or something left for her. See, he's just being dramatic, she thought. He wouldn't really leave me. A faint smile tugged at her lips, but it froze as soon as she read the handwritten note on top of the stack. It was unmistakably George's handwriting, beautiful and precise, almost artistic, but the words he had written felt like a hammer striking her chest. Anna, congratulations on your wedding. We're done. Her ears buzzed, and her mind went blank. She read the note again and again, hoping she had misunderstood. But no, the words didn't change. He's leaving me. No, that's impossible. Desperation took hold of her. She ripped the note from the stack, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it away. But this action revealed the second page, a printed screenshot of a conversation. Anna froze as she recognized the profile picture and nickname of the sender. It was Makoto. The first message was sent 2 weeks ago. So, you're the lover Anna keeps hidden. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Makoto, her fiancé. You'd better know your place and leave. When Anna and I are married, it'll be embarrassing for you to be kicked out of the villa. Whenever I call, Anna comes to me. Tomorrow, we're meeting each other's parents. Once we're married, what will you be? Just a secret lover. She loves you. So what? She already kissed me. How much longer until we end up in bed together? Interspersed among the messages were photos and videos. Anna and Makoto trying on wedding outfits, choosing rings, visiting the wedding venue. One video had been paused at the most damning frame, Makoto leaning in to kiss Anna as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Anna's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her heart sinking deeper with every word and image. George knew everything. Chapter 11. It was the image of her and Makoto, surrounded by their families and friends, locked in a kiss as though it were the ultimate declaration of love. The fragile thread in Anna's mind snapped, and a wave of silent panic washed over her. Her face turned pale, and she mumbled, "I don't believe it," over and over. She stumbled toward the staircase, her legs weak and trembling. As she climbed the stairs, her foot slipped, and with a thud, she tumbled down the steps. The sharp pain brought her back to reality. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed the handrail and pulled herself up, hobbling toward the bedroom. This time, she moved slower, and no further accidents occurred. She made her way to the bedroom and stopped short as she opened the door. The room was barren. Everything belonging to George was gone. Even the photo frames on the nightstands, once holding pictures of the two of them, were empty. The frames sat in their usual spots, but the photos had vanished. Anna's eyes filled with panic as realization dawned. She yanked open the closet, then the drawers. After pulling out her belongings, she saw only empty spaces where his things once were. She searched every corner of the villa, the bedroom, bathroom, study, everywhere. Not a single trace of George remained. Her mind flashed back to when George suggested they do a spring cleaning, casually discarding every couple's item they owned. Now, she understood why he had done it. He was cutting ties, erasing every trace of their time together. The emptiness inside her grew heavier, threatening to suffocate her. She couldn't believe it. After 5 years of being together, after everything they shared, he had left her so mercilessly, taking nothing but his own belongings. Her disbelief turned into desperation. She needed to find him, to ask him why. Before she knew it, she was back in the living room. Her fingers trembled as she dialed his number, the long beeping tone echoing in her ears. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before he finally picked up. It was late, and his voice carried the grogginess of someone abruptly woken from sleep. He didn't check the caller ID before answering and asked, half asleep, "Who is this?" "George, it's me," Anna said, her voice unsteady. Afraid he might hang up thinking it was a prank call, she rushed to add, "Where are you? I want to see you. Where are our photos?" The sound of her voice instantly snapped George awake. He glanced at his phone and saw her name displayed on the screen. Letting out a deep sigh, he realized his mistake. I forgot to block her number. Chapter 12. In the brief silence, Anna called my name again and again, her persistence grating on my nerves. Anna, I said curtly, you're about to get married. Some boundaries should be respected. As for the photos, I burned them. When Mr. Ito moves into the villa, I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate seeing such things. Meeting up is even more unnecessary. You're about to marry someone else, so why would you want to meet your ex-boyfriend? Hearing that I had burned the photos, Anna felt her heart shatter. But it wasn't just the loss of the photos, it was the finality in my rejection that hurt the most. George, I didn't agree to break up, she said hastily, her voice trembling. It's not what you think with Makoto. The only person I love is you. How could you abandon me like this? Her voice faltered, and I could hear the faint sound of her crying. I paused. Anna rarely cried. In our 5 years together, I had only seen her cry once, after the car accident. Despite being the one gravely injured, she had wept uncontrollably upon seeing the unavoidable wounds on me, her usual composed demeanor utterly shattered. This was the second time. I never denied the love Anna once had for me. In fact, it was because I had witnessed the depth of her love that I could tell when it began to waver. She might still love me, but I was no longer the only one she loved. That's why, when faced with choices, I was the first to be sacrificed, whether it was her secretly considering making me her lover or instinctively saving Makoto during the car accident. I was no longer her priority. So even as I heard her sobs and felt her sadness, my heart remained unmoved. Anna, I said evenly, we broke up. Breaking up doesn't require mutual agreement. And if anyone abandoned this relationship, it was you. You gave up on us first. How can you accuse me of abandoning you now? Let me make this clear, we are over. Please don't contact me again. Each word struck Anna's heart like a dagger. She opened her mouth to speak, her eyes filled with sorrow. George. She barely managed to utter my name before the call disconnected. The sound of the line cutting off left her stunned. When she tried to call me back, she found her calls wouldn't go through. Blocked. Anna tried other ways to reach me, but every message she sent returned with a red exclamation mark. Defeated. She collapsed onto the couch, her gaze falling back to the stack of papers on the table. Staring at the pile, her sadness and anger boiled over. She swept the papers off the table with a forceful swipe, sending them fluttering through the air. Pages floated down onto the table, the couch, and the floor with a rustling sound. Makoto. This is all Makoto's fault. If he hadn't stirred things up, George wouldn't have left so decisively. The final page landed in front of her. On it was the last message Makoto had sent to George. So what if he loves you? You've already kissed me. How much longer until we're in bed together? Anna's eyes darkened as she read those words, her gaze heavy and unwavering. After a long moment, she let out a cold laugh. Her lifeless eyes flashed with a sudden, vicious glint. Makoto, she muttered to herself, I told you long ago that the only person I'd ever love is George. How dare you go after him? Since you're so eager to get married, why don't I give you a wedding gift? Chapter 13. Unaware of Anna's thoughts, I calmly blocked her number and every other way she could contact me. Once done, I placed my phone aside and drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. That night, I slept better than I had in a long time. The next day marked my first day at Wong Group, and I woke up early. Despite being confident in my ability to establish myself in the role, I was determined to avoid giving anyone any reason to criticize me, especially on my first day. Wong Group was a family business with a history spanning over a century. Its reach extended across industries, fashion, luxury jewelry, fragrances, cosmetics, skincare, and even household goods. Not only did the company have a presence in these fields, but it also led them. Initially, I had planned to start from one of the company's smaller brands and work my way up. However, my parents insisted that I was capable of handling greater responsibilities and directly placed me in the position of CEO. By the time I officially assumed the role, news of a young, dashing CEO parachuting into Wong Group had spread throughout the industry. While I was stepping into this new chapter, Anna was drowning her sorrows at the largest club in City B with her friends. Even though they knew I had broken up with Anna after discovering her engagement to Makoto, none of them took it seriously. One of her friends sneered, he's just upset about being sidelined. Breaking up was probably a rash decision. Didn't he quit his job recently? Don't worry, Anna. Once he burns through his savings, he'll come crawling back. After all, who else is going to clean up after his gambling father and sickly mother? Exactly, another chimed in. Guys like him, wannabe gold diggers who dream of marrying up, always react this way when reality hits them. Give it some time, and he'll come begging. Right, did he really think he could be your husband? He should be grateful for the life he's had with you, luxuries he'd never even dreamed of before. The mocking comments about me went on and on, their voices grating and incessant. Even Anna, who had been silently drinking, found them unbearable. Her face darkened, and without warning, she smashed her glass against the table, The sharp sound of shattering glass and scattering shards silenced the room. In the sudden quiet, Anna's icy voice cut through. Have you said enough? Her friend stared at her, stunned into silence. No one could understand what had triggered her anger. It wasn't the first time they had spoken about me like this, often even in her presence. And Anna had never defended me before, so why now? Maria, seated closest to Anna, was the first to break the silence. She frowned but dismissed Anna's outburst as nothing serious. With a mocking chuckle, she said, "What's wrong, Anna?" Still upset, "We know you care about him, but let's be real. He'll never let go of someone as rich as you. Trust me, he'll come crawling back within 2 weeks, and then it'll be up to you to decide how to handle him." The moment Maria finished speaking, Anna raised her head and glared at her. Her eyes were sharp, her voice icy. "Apologize." Maria froze, confused. "Apologize to him," Anna repeated, her tone cold and unwavering. It was only then that Maria realized Anna was genuinely angry because of their comments about me. Still, Maria tried to brush it off. "Anna, come on, why are you so worked up? We're not wrong, are we? He's just a poor guy who latched onto you for money. You didn't argue with us before when we said the same things." Chapter 14. Maria's comment caused Anna to freeze. The sharpness in her eyes faded, replaced by confusion. So they had said things like this about George before, and she had let it slide every time. She rummaged through her memories, searching for instances where she might have defended him, only to realize Maria was right. This wasn't the first time her friends had belittled George. Whether George was absent or present but unable to understand their French, Anna had always chosen to stay silent. Only when they mocked him directly in front of him did she occasionally interject, but those objections were half-hearted, more for show than genuine defense. That realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Her tacit acceptance of their comments mirrored her true thoughts at the time. Her chest tightened, and she found herself at a loss for words. Instead, she reached for another drink and began downing one glass after another. Yet amidst her guilt and regret, a glimmer of hope surfaced. George had a gambling father and a sick mother. Now he had no job. Perhaps, given time, he really would return to her. Meanwhile, her friends shifted the conversation. "Did you hear about Wang Group? They've just appointed a new CEO. One of them said, "I heard it's the Wang family's eldest son." Another chimed in, "Apparently, he's been away for years, training himself. Now that he's back, they handed him the company right away. Well, he's their only heir. It makes sense that everything would go to him eventually, even if he's parachuted into the role. He's probably been groomed for this all his life." Honestly, it's wild how some people are born into such privilege. Even with the same last name, the difference between people can be staggering. Anna had no interest in the conversation and stayed silent, drowning in her thoughts as the number of empty bottles in front of her grew. She paid no attention to the mention of the Wang family's eldest son returning after years of being away. Nor did she realize that George's departure and the note he left her were not just out of anger but the truth. By the time the gathering ended, it was late at night. Anna had drunk so much that she could barely stand. Concerned for her safety, Maria called Makoto to pick her up. When Makoto arrived, only Maria was left with Anna, who was slumped over and barely conscious. Maria handed Anna over to him with a teasing smile. "Take good care of her, brother-in-law. Make sure she gets home safely." She gave him a knowing look before grabbing her car keys and leaving Makoto alone with an intoxicated Anna. Instead of taking her to the Lee family villa, Makoto brought her to his own. Once inside, he carried her into the bedroom and placed her gently on the soft bed. He carefully wiped her face and tucked her in before lying down beside her. "Anna," he whispered, "we're getting married anyway. What's the harm in moving things forward a little?" He leaned closer to her, but just as the tension in the room seemed to peak, Anna stirred, pressing herself against him. Her head nestled into the crook of his neck, her warm breath brushing against his skin and sending shivers down his spine. The room's atmosphere grew heavier, charged with an intimate heat, but the name that escaped her lips the next moment froze him in place. "George," she murmured, her voice soft but clear. She made no further moves, only clung to him tightly, as though afraid that if she let go, the person she truly wanted would disappear forever. Makoto's expression darkened. He lay still, holding her, his mind racing. His eyes flickered with a venomous glint. George, always George. If only George would disappear from this world for good. Chapter 15. Anna woke up with a pounding headache, instinctively raising her hand to massage her temples. But the moment she became aware of another person beside her, her hand froze midair. Turning her head, she saw a head of brown-dyed hair and, without thinking, blurted out, "George?" The moment the name left her lips, she realized something was off. George was still in City A, and he had ended things so decisively just days ago. There was no way he would be lying next to her now, let alone with dyed hair, something he had never done. A sense of dread crept over her as she pushed the person beside her with sudden force. The man, startled awake, tumbled off the bed with a loud thud. Makoto groaned as he hit the floor. rubbing his side before looking up to see Anna glaring at him with an icy expression. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold, devoid of any warmth, making Makoto's face flush with both embarrassment and frustration. If it had been someone else looking at him with such disdain, he might have been able to elicit pity with his pitiful expression. Even the old Anna, before her breakup with George, might have softened, but the Anna standing before him now was the one who had read every word of his taunts to George. Seeing that Anna remained unmoved, her expression growing darker, Makoto suppressed his irritation and quickly explained, "You were drunk last night. You wouldn't let me take you back to your villa, so I had no choice but to bring you to my place." It was only then that Anna noticed her surroundings. She had been so consumed by anger earlier that she hadn't realized she wasn't in her own bedroom. Her expression softened slightly, but the suspicion in her eyes didn't waver. "Then why were you sleeping next to me?" Makoto's face flushed deeper. He stammered, I planned to leave after settling you in, but you wouldn't let go of me." His hesitant demeanor and words made Anna's eyes darken further. Whether or not she believed him, she didn't say. She simply stood, giving him a cold, pointed look before walking out of the room. Pausing at the door, she bit her lip and said, "Makoto, stop playing games. The only reason we're getting married is because you're obedient and easy for my parents to handle. If you try this again, I won't hesitate to replace you." Makoto's face twisted with anger as he watched her leave. His jaw clenched so tightly it was a wonder he didn't crack a tooth. Meanwhile, in City A, I glanced at yet another unknown number flashing on my phone screen. For the first time, I found myself likening Anna to a relentless leech that refused to let go. After I had blocked her number, there had been blessed silence for a while, but recently, for reasons I couldn't fathom, she had started calling me from different numbers. Each time I blocked one, another would spring up in its place. I sighed in frustration as I disconnected and blocked yet another number. Finally, the incessant ringing stopped. Exhaling slowly, I placed my phone face down on the desk, put it on silent, and turned my attention back to the documents in front of me. This project was the first major undertaking I had accepted since joining Wong Group. If I could successfully secure it, it would solidify my position among the company's upper management. I had accepted the challenge without hesitation, only to discover afterward that Anna had unexpectedly joined the bidding process. I wasn't afraid to face her directly, but I couldn't understand her motives. The Lee family's strength lay in City B. Why would Anna suddenly intervene in a project in City A? Was it because of me? The thought made me chuckle darkly. Did Anna think this was some grand romantic gesture, balancing wedding preparations with one man while clinging to another, as if juggling two lives was perfectly justified? And yet, she had the audacity to tell me that things between her and Makoto weren't what I thought. But even if she didn't love Makoto, what did it matter? Makoto was her choice. She had agreed to the engagement herself. Whether I was the heir to the wealthiest family or just an ordinary man, she had no right to turn me from her legitimate boyfriend into her secret lover. Chapter 16. The bidding competition this time was intense. It wasn't just Wong Group participating. Nearly all the top-tier conglomerates in City A were involved. It wasn't unusual for competitors from other cities, like Anna, to join as well. Given the scale, the organizers decided to host a banquet, inviting all participating companies to attend. When my aunt handed me the invitation, she gave me a sly wink. Her expression left me confused. I asked, "Auntie, is there something else I should know?" She rolled her eyes at me. Seeing that I genuinely seemed to have forgotten about the matter she'd mentioned earlier, she patted my shoulder and said, "Don't tell me you've forgotten. I told you about my friend's daughter and suggested you meet her. She's been busy, but guess what? She's also attending this banquet for the bidding. Perfect timing for you two to meet." Hearing it was about the matchmaking again, I was momentarily speechless. Given the setting, I couldn't help but laugh awkwardly. "Auntie," I said, "this is a bidding event. That makes us competitors. Who arranges a blind date between competitors during a bidding event? You're really one of a kind." I even gave her a playful thumbs up, but my aunt wasn't the least bit concerned. "So what?" she replied. "Being opponents in business doesn't mean you can't connect personally. Besides, if you meet her first, maybe you can use a bit of charm to your advantage. I've heard that while she's never dated anyone, she once had a crush on someone. Guess what? He's your type." I froze for a moment. It reminded me of the last time I checked the contact she shared with me. I had discovered that the girl and I were already friends online, but because there was no need to send a friend request, I had completely forgotten about her afterward and never reached out. Now, my aunt's reminder brought her back to my mind. She likes someone like me, and she's already added me as a friend. Was that why she added me in the first place? I frowned slightly, and my impression of her dropped a notch. It seemed less like she wasn't interested in finding a boyfriend and more like she couldn't let go of the person she once liked. Wouldn't meeting her now feel like volunteering to be someone's stand-in? I didn't mention my doubts to my aunt, who had no idea about the history. Instead, I gave her a perfunctory smile, accepted the invitation, and felt indifferent about the meeting. I thought my silence would be taken as a polite refusal. but my aunt must have interpreted it as consent. On the day of the bidding, she sent a car to wait outside the Wang family villa. "Hello, Mr. Wang." The woman was dressed in an elegant Chanel suit and approached me as I stepped out. I stopped in front of her, not taking another step forward. "I don't believe I've asked for your name," I said. She hesitated, her eyes dropping for a moment as if to hide a flicker of disappointment. After a brief pause, she replied, "Willow. My last name is Liu." Satisfied with her answer, I didn't prolong the awkwardness. When she gestured toward the car, I followed her and got into the passenger seat. Once inside, I remained silent, my gaze fixed on the passing scenery outside the window. Yet her name lingered in my mind, repeating itself over and over. There was something oddly familiar about it, though I couldn't place why. I stole a glance at her, noticing how focused she was on driving. She seemed to want to say something but hesitated. After a moment of indecision, she stayed quiet, and so did I. Before long, we arrived at the banquet hall. We stepped out of the car, and I began walking toward the entrance, assuming she would follow. But when I glanced back, I saw her standing still with a dazed expression. "What's wrong?" I asked. She pressed her lips together, then met my gaze and said, "Most people walk in arm with their dates." Chapter 17. For some reason, even though Willow's face remained neutral, I thought I caught a trace of disappointment in her expression. I cleared my throat, trying to dispel the awkwardness, and walked back to her. Taking her arm gently, I led her toward the banquet hall. As we neared the entrance, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, "Have we met before?" The flicker of sadness in Willow's eyes deepened. "He doesn't remember me at all," she thought. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. But finally, she broke the silence. "We were classmates in high school," she said softly. "I was the one who always sat in the corner." Her words carried a quiet weight, drawing me into a past I had almost forgotten. Back in high school, Willow had been the reserved one, always keeping to herself. Her classmates rarely noticed her, and even her parents, often busy with their careers, paid little attention to her. Living in her own world, Willow rarely interacted with others. Despite her striking appearance, she was easily overlooked, just as I had overlooked her until now. But Willow had noticed me. She liked me from the moment I approached her differently than others. While most classmates barely acknowledged her presence, I made a point to include her, never skipping her during group discussions or activities. I had become the most frequent figure in her otherwise isolated world, the only light in her life, but her shyness held her back. At graduation, she managed only to add me as a friend through our shared classmate directory. Despite wanting to talk to me, she never sent a single message. Years later, while studying abroad and undergoing therapy, she learned through mutual acquaintances that I was in a relationship. Heartbroken, she decided she would remain a silent observer in my life, content as long as I was happy. But when she heard about my breakup, hope rekindled within her, and so, she returned. Hearing Willow's explanation, fragments of memory resurfaced. I recalled the quiet girl who always sat at the edge of the classroom. Yet looking at her now, poised and composed at such a high-profile event, I found it hard to reconcile the girl she had been with the woman she had become. "You've changed a lot," I said, unable to hide my surprise. "You're even more beautiful now." Her cheeks turned red, and she averted her eyes shyly. The banquet hall buzzed with energy. People milled about, chatting and networking. We had just stepped inside when the sound of hurried footsteps behind us caught my attention. I turned instinctively, only to lock eyes with two figures entering the hall. "George!" The simultaneous exclamation drew the attention of everyone in the room. Ito, Makoto, and Anna. Their dramatic outburst left me frowning. Despite being from two of City B's most prominent families, their lack of decorum was glaring. How could they act so unsophisticated at such a formal event? Unwilling to engage, I turned back to Willow. Taking her hand firmly, I quickened my pace, guiding her deeper into the crowd and away from the pair at the entrance. Chapter 18. Anna froze at first, shocked to see me at the banquet hall, especially holding another woman's hand. Her surprise quickly gave way to anger, overriding any sense of composure. Ignoring Makoto, who was right beside her, she hurried to catch up with us. "George, who is she? Why are you with her?" she demanded, her voice sharp and confrontational. Makoto caught up moments later, his expression contorting into a sneer as he looked between Willow and me, his gaze lingering on our intertwined hands. "Isn't it obvious?" Makoto said with a mocking chuckle. "He must have latched onto someone new after breaking up with you. How else could he get into a place like this? Someone like him could never afford to be here on his own." His tone was so smug, so self-assured, that he didn't even notice Anna's expression darkening further, nor the uncomfortable looks other attendees were giving them. Wang Group was the wealthiest family in City A. As the heir to the Wang fortune, I didn't need anyone's connections to attend this event. Anyone who understood even the basics of the business world would have realized that. Yet here stood Makoto, obliviously spouting nonsense, while Anna's expression began to crack under the weight of embarrassment. No one in the crowd felt the need to correct them. The spectacle was too entertaining to interrupt. Willow, however, wasn't amused. She stepped forward, her expression cold, and grabbed Anna's wrist with a firm grip. "Let go," Willow said, her voice sharp and devoid of emotion. Anna winced at the sudden pressure on her wrist and looked at Willow in shock. Caught off guard, she nearly cried out in pain but stubbornly refused to release her grip on my hand. Seeing Anna's discomfort, Makoto's protective instincts kicked in. He jabbed a finger toward Willow, his voice rising as he snapped, "Do you know who we are? How dare you lay a hand on us? Do you want to regret this for the rest of your life?" Though Anna didn't say anything, the flash of dark satisfaction in her eyes, coupled with her refusal to stop Makoto's tirade, made it clear she agreed with him. I let out a dry chuckle, signaling Willow to release Anna's wrist. Willow hesitated but relented when I nodded reassuringly. Anna's tense expression relaxed slightly, and Makoto smirked, mistaking our restraint for fear. He opened his mouth, likely to continue his tirade, but before he could get a word out, I pulled off the brooch pinned to my jacket and jabbed it into Anna's hand without hesitation. Anna stared at me, unflinching, convinced I wouldn't dare harm her. After all, she believed I still loved her too much to follow through. "George, I know," she began, but her words were cut off by a sharp gasp of pain as the brooch pierced her skin. Her grip on my hand weakened, and I pulled away easily. Makoto, seeing Anna hurt, lunged at me in a rage. I sidestepped his swing and, with a swift motion, landed a solid punch on his nose. Blood poured from Makoto's nose as he staggered back, clutching his face in disbelief. "George," he screamed, his voice filled with anger and humiliation. In stark contrast to his outburst, I remained calm, brushing the confrontation off as if it were nothing. I handed Willow a tissue for her hands, then casually picked up another to wipe my own wrist. My gaze shifted to Makoto, cool and disdainful. "Do you really think you're someone important?" I asked, my tone dripping with mockery. Anna's face flushed with humiliation, her anger simmering just below the surface. But before she could respond, I added, "You two came here to bid, yet you don't even know who your competitors are. What a pair of fools." Competitors? Anna and Makoto exchanged uncertain glances. Their minds raced as they recalled the bidding documents they had reviewed earlier. Recognition dawned as they matched Willow's face with the profile of Liu family's second daughter, one of City A's most prominent families. Compared to the Wang and Liu families, even the esteemed Ito and Li families were insignificant. For the first time that evening, Willow broke her silence. Her voice was calm yet commanding as she addressed Makoto. "Instead of asking if I know who you are," she said coolly, "perhaps you should first ask the person beside you who we are." Chapter 19. The word "we" froze both Anna and Makoto in their tracks. Did she mean not just her but me as well? Was I also here as a competitor in the bidding? The realization hit them like a brick. Among the attendees, the only identity that fit was Wang Group's heir, City A's wealthiest family. Anna and Makoto's faces turned deathly pale. Looking around, they saw the amused expressions on the other attendees. In that moment, it became clear who the real spectacle was. Anna's face flushed alternately red and green. Unable to bear the humiliation, she ignored the reason they were here in the first place and fled the banquet hall in disarray. Makoto shot me one last venomous glare before rushing after her. I caught his look of resentment but dismissed it with indifference. Makoto's animosity toward me was nothing new. His confidence rested solely on the support of the Ito family and his shaky engagement to Anna. But Anna had proven herself willing to choose someone else when the benefits outweighed her attachment. When Makoto could no longer offer her what she needed, she'd discard him without hesitation. As for the Ito family, they'd be the first to abandon him if they discovered he had offended Wang Group. I wouldn't even need to lift a finger. But for now, my focus was on the bidding. The organizers took the stage shortly after the drama subsided. They barely glanced at the retreating figures of Anna and Makoto, mentally crossing their names off the list. The competition was intense, but in the end, I successfully secured the project. On the drive home, Willow was once again behind the wheel. This time, it was she who broke the silence. "Do you still like her?" she asked abruptly. Her question caught me off guard, and it took me a moment to realize she was referring to Anna. My expression turned incredulous. "Where did you get that idea?" I asked. "I thought you agreed to this blind date because you knew she'd be here and wanted to make her jealous," Willow admitted. Her assumption made sense, given my initial indifference toward her. Though I had treated Anna harshly at the banquet, the thought lingered in her mind, if I didn't care for her, why would I agree to the date in the first place? I sighed. "My aunt suggested it, so I came to take a look. But I'm not the type to carry feelings for one person while pursuing another. Loyalty is something I value in a partner, so I hold myself to the same standard." Perhaps the events of the evening had eased the tension between us, or perhaps it was her genuine curiosity, but I found myself patiently explaining my stance. We chatted casually for the rest of the ride. Before long, the car pulled up in front of the Wang family villa. I waved a quick goodbye and headed toward the entrance, but as I approached the door, I paused, noticing that her car hadn't driven away. It sat idling in place. Curious, I walked back to her. She lowered the window as I approached, her eyes wide with mild confusion. Mr. Wang, is there something else? She asked. I smiled. We're old classmates. No need to be so formal. Call me George. I paused before adding. Also, I only agreed to this date because of my aunt. I'm not looking to start a new relationship right now. Let's just stay friends for the time being. Her expression softened, and I gave her a friendly wave. Drive safe on your way home. As I turned and walked through the villa gates, her car remained parked for a moment longer. Watching my retreating figure, Willow's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile. Chapter 20. Willow had waited for years, so she didn't mind waiting a little longer. As I said, we would stay as friends for now, and besides, moving from strangers to friends was already enough to make her content. That night, unlike two sleepless people in City B, both Willow and I slept soundly. The next morning, I was awakened by the incessant ringing of my phone. Groggy and half awake, I glanced at the screen and found that my social media accounts were being bombarded with notifications. The endless chimes drew my attention to malicious comments, full of vile insults and accusations. Just then, a call came in from a City B number. It was David, an old friend from my time in City B. George, he exclaimed, his voice brimming with indignation. Have you seen the stuff online? These people just blindly believe whatever they hear. They're even accusing you, the heir to the richest family, of meddling in someone else's relationship. You have to clear this up. Make sure those slandering you face the consequences. His words came out in a torrent, and his heavy breathing reflected his fury and frustration. Thanks to his explanation, I finally understood what had happened. Apparently, after Makoto returned to City B, he still couldn't get over the humiliation he suffered at the banquet. Relying on his engagement with Anna, he twisted the truth and claimed that I had interfered in their relationship. To make matters worse, he released evidence of Anna and me living together after their engagement. Initially, the netizens didn't believe that someone like me, a scion of wealth, would interfere in another's relationship. But Makoto's so-called evidence, combined with testimonies from Anna's so-called friends, fueled the rumors. The scandal exploded overnight. My social media was inundated with abusive comments. You're filthy rich, but didn't anyone teach you morals? Breaking up families is disgusting. Rich heir or not, you're shameless and immoral. Boycott George, boycott Wang Group. Among the storm of insults were some who hurled vile and obscene remarks, while others, more rational, called for patience in my response. Unfortunately, the latter were drowned out by the majority. I spoke calmly into the phone. I'll take care of it. Don't forget, I'm the heir to the wealthiest family. Wang Group's legal team isn't just for show. If he dares spread lies, he must be ready for the consequences. Hearing the confidence in my voice, David finally sighed in relief. After offering me a few words of encouragement, he hung up. Once the call ended, I returned to the internet to gauge the extent of the uproar. As I scrolled through the flood of malicious comments, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of anger. Back then, they had looked down on me, convinced I was unworthy of Anna because they thought I was poor. But now, even with my identity as the heir to the wealthiest family known to the public, where did they get the audacity to collude with Makoto to slander me? My expression darkened as I methodically captured screenshots of all the defamatory posts. Just then, my phone rang again. This time, it was another unfamiliar number. After a brief hesitation, I answered. George, came a familiar voice, calm and reassuring. Are you okay? Don't let what's online get to you. I know you didn't do any of those things, and you shouldn't be upset over baseless accusations. I believe my parents are already dealing with this, but if there's anything I can help with, please don't hesitate to let me know. Chapter 21. Hearing the gentle urgency in Willow's voice, I felt the frustration in my chest dissolve. A faint smile tugged at my lips as I replied. It's all right. I'm not that fragile. It's just a rumor. I can handle it myself. Okay, she responded softly, noticing that my tone was lighthearted. Willow seemed to relax. Yet, she lingered on the call, hesitant to hang up but unsure of what more to say. Silence enveloped us, the quiet so profound that I could almost hear her steady, shallow breathing through the line. Eventually, I broke the stillness. Willow, thank you, I said sincerely, though the rumors didn't truly faze me. Her concern touched me deeply. I kept that last thought to myself before quickly ending the call. On her end, Willow stared at the now silent phone, feeling as though time had passed too quickly. When my parents first learned about the online abuse I was receiving, they were furious, nearly ready to personally confront Anna, Makoto, and their meddlesome friends. My father was livid. A shameless man and a treacherous woman, they don't know their place, throwing dirt on my son's name. Truly ignorant fools daring to provoke the Wang family. My mother wasn't far behind, rolling her eyes dramatically. Ignorant fools, more like downright animals. How dare they? It took some effort to calm them down, and seeing their fiery indignation left me both amused and exasperated. Relax, Mom, Dad, I said with a grin. Trust me, I won't let them get away with it. They spread lies, so they'll have to pay the price for it. Meanwhile, in City B, at the Ito family estate, Anna sat with a dark cloud over her face. Her gaze bore into Makoto, who sat sobbing uncontrollably before her, his pitiful appearance only fueling her irritation. Her voice was sharp and scornful. How many times have I told you to keep your schemes in check? I thought you might still have some use, but you've got some nerve, roping in Maria and the others to smear George. Do you know what a mess you've made? Makoto shook his head frantically, his tears streaming, but it did nothing to stir her sympathy. Anna, Makoto stammered, George is nothing but a fraud. He lied to you for 5 years, pretending to be poor when he's the heir to the Wang fortune. And now that we've crossed him, do you really think he'll let us off easily? Instead of waiting for him to retaliate, why not join forces and bring Wang Group to its knees? His words caused a flicker of thought to cross Anna's face, her expression softening slightly. Yes, George had deceived her for 5 years, pretending to be someone he wasn't. If she had known his true identity, she wouldn't have needed to agree to any arranged marriage. She had accepted him despite the fake identity he had concocted and kept him close. And what did he do in return? He used the first opportunity to cut ties, leaving her to face humiliation and loss. Why should she protect his lofty reputation? Let him fall. Once he hit rock bottom, wouldn't he come crawling back to her? After all, he'd already discarded everything they had shared, burning and throwing away all traces of their past. If they stuck to their story and painted him as a scoundrel, wouldn't the world believe it? He'd be left with no choice but to live under the label of a cheater while his fortune crumbled. Anna's gaze shifted back to Makoto, and this time, there was a hint of approval in her eyes. Then you'd better work harder, she said coldly. Make sure you drag him down from his position as the richest heir. With that, she turned on her heels and left Makoto's villa without looking back. Chapter 22. The hum of the departing car faded into the distance, leaving Makoto standing in his villa, his eyes filled with venomous resentment. He hadn't acted on impulse when he schemed against me. Ever since returning from a city and failing miserably at the bidding event, where he not only lost the project but also offended me, the Wang heir, the Ito family had decisively abandoned him. Makoto had hoped to solidify his position in the Ito family through his engagement to Anna. Yet when he brought it up to Ito's patriarch and matriarch, they didn't even hesitate before slapping him across the face. You still dare mention your engagement to Anna? She came to us today to annul it herself. You couldn't even hold on to her. Tell us, Makoto, what use do you have now? They sneered. For the first time, Makoto realized he had been cast aside by everyone. But why? He thought bitterly. George, it's because of you. Because of you. The Ito family gave up on me, and Anna despises me. How dare you still stand above me? Looking down with disdain. Consumed by anger, Makoto redirected all his fury toward me. With Maria and Anna as his accomplices, he decided to make a desperate last-ditch effort. They had assumed that I had erased all traces of my 5 years with Anna. Even if I presented evidence of our relationship, they thought they could fabricate something older to counter it. But they hadn't accounted for the 2 surveillance videos and chat logs I had kept as my trump card. The first video captured their conversation in French, which took place just a month ago, right in front of me. Although the audio was slightly distorted due to being recorded from a distance, the content was crystal clear. Anna had secretly gotten engaged to someone else while planning to keep me around as her lover under the guise of love. The second video was footage of my confrontation with Makoto outside the restroom at the banquet. The audio revealed me stating clearly that I had been in a relationship with Anna for 5 years before Makoto came into the picture. Even as I labeled him the interloper, Makoto's response was nothing more than impotent rage. He never once denied it. If I were truly the one who had interfered in their relationship, given Makoto's personality, he would have refuted me right there. To make matters worse for him, the chat logs I released contained Makoto's boastful and antagonistic messages directed at me. These included taunts about his victory and Anna's supposed allegiance to him, behavior unbecoming of someone who claimed to be a victim of infidelity. The narrative flipped overnight. The same netizens who had mercilessly vilified me now turned their venom toward Anna and Makoto. As the so-called righteous defenders of justice flooded their profiles with vitriol, I took the matter a step further. I filed a lawsuit against every individual who had slandered me online and gained significant traction with their comments. This included netizens who had jumped on the bandwagon, as well as Maria and Anna's other so-called friends. I handed the case over to Wang Group's legal team, confident in their ability to follow through. When I logged back into my social media, the comments section was finally peaceful. Any remaining dissenters were swiftly muted. Those who attempted to resume their vitriol after their bans were lifted were met with court summons appearing in their inboxes. At last, they quieted down for good. To address the supportive messages I had received, I posted a tweet to express my stance. The law is clear, and justice prevails. Only those with guilty consciences fear rumors. As for me, I will wield the law to defend my rights. Chapter 23. Makoto was completely abandoned. I didn't focus much on the aftermath. I trusted that the legal team would make sure they paid for their actions. However, when I heard that Makoto had to represent himself in court, without even a lawyer to defend him, I couldn't help but feel a little pity. Honestly, if Makoto had stayed out of my way, he could have kept up the appearance of a perfect marriage with Anna. Just another ordinary wealthy couple. But he was never satisfied. While I was still close to Anna, he wanted to push me out. Once I left, he blamed me for everything he'd suffered and tried to step all over me. In the end, this was his fate. Even Anna's sisters, led by Maria, who always believed that birthright determined everything, eventually had no choice but to side with Makoto. They too were dragged into the lawsuit. It was all unnecessary. On the other hand, Anna, the central figure of all this, had never spoken out publicly. By choosing silence, she managed to distance herself from the entire affair. When the legal team representative came to see me with the final verdict, he reported that, due to the severity of the case, those involved, despite continuing to shout their innocence in court, were all sentenced to 2 years in prison due to their poor attitude and my refusal to settle. Netizens later commented that it was an incredibly rare sight to see a group of rich heirs crying as they were locked away in prison, and perhaps this would be the only time in their lives they'd witness something like that. After hearing about their sentences, I didn't follow up with the case. What surprised me, however, was that Anna came to see me once again. At that moment, I was discussing dinner plans with Willow. When the phone on the front desk rang, the receptionist said, "Mr. Wong, a Miss Lee says she'd like to meet with you." I paused, looking over at Willow, who had, in just a month, brought down the Lee group, and hesitated for a moment before agreeing. I was curious why Anna would seek me out now. After everything had completely soured between us, I had imagined Anna might be struggling, but when I saw her, I was taken aback. It had only been a few months, but I barely recognized her. The woman sitting in front of me, frail, worn out, and looking at least 10 years older, was the same Anna who had once been so radiant and full of life. I was shocked for only a moment, before quickly regaining my composure and adopting the same cold, distant demeanor I always kept in front of her. Anna, clearly surprised to see Willow sitting beside me, seemed to lose her breath for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure, knowing that she had no leverage in front of me anymore. With a face full of regret, she sought my last bit of mercy. "George, I know I wronged you before, but I never lied to you. I've always loved only you. Please, for the sake of our past, let go of Lee Group." She lowered herself completely. The arrogance she had once subtly displayed when we were together, now absent. She looked completely different, almost like a shadow of her former self. I spread my hands, shook my head, and then pointed to Willow sitting beside me. Chapter 24, I said. "The person who wanted to bring down Lee Group is not me. Why don't you ask her?" I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. I continued, "Moreover, Anna, haven't you already drained our past relationship? When you secretly got engaged to someone else, intending to keep me around as just a lover. When you and your sisters mocked and belittled me in French, never once considering to stop them. When Makoto and your friends spread rumors about me, and you quietly stood by, never once intervening. Now, you're talking about our past relationship. Why didn't you think about it back then, when you were doing all these things?" As I spoke, Anna's face turned pale, and at that moment, she felt the bitter taste in her throat, making it hard for her to even swallow. She said, "George, I know I was wrong, and I apologize. But if this continues, Lee Group really won't be able to bear it." I shrugged indifferently. What does it matter to me if Lee Group can't bear it? Anna, they've paid the price for their actions. Why do you think a light apology from you can pull you out of this mess? She retorted, "But I never did those things to you." She was desperate, trying to justify herself, but when she saw my smile vanish the moment I spoke, her words faltered. I said, "You didn't do those things. You were just a passive observer." "Anna, people like you, the bystanders, are the most despicable." I looked at her. The disgust in my eyes was unmasked. "Because of your inaction. Your friends treated me so horribly. Because of your silence. Makoto had the chance to hurt me over and over again. And now, you're telling me you didn't do anything. Fine. You didn't do anything. I didn't bring down Lee Group either. I can't help with Lee Group's problems." I raised my voice. "Now, please leave." I opened the office door and put on a perfectly official smile. "Please, go." She tried to say something, but I grabbed Willow's hand and walked past her without a second glance. After all, I was the CEO. A little time off wasn't a problem. As for the person in the office, there were others watching her, so everything would be fine. I asked, "So, where should we go for dinner? Western food or home-cooked meals? I've been craving home-cooked food lately." Willow answered, "Let's go with home-cooked food. I'll leave it up to you." Her face softened, no longer the same quiet and reserved woman I had first met. I turned back and raised an eyebrow, asking, "Why do you always listen to me?" She suddenly stopped walking. When she looked at me, Her gaze was so serious that my heart skipped a beat. I was about to change the subject and keep walking when her voice came from behind, calling after me, because, George, I like you. Her confession was sudden, yet in some ways, I had already expected it. My steps froze, and I turned to look at her. I sighed, about to speak, but the words of rejection didn't come. She said, I know you've said that you're not ready for a new relationship. So when you are, can I be the first one you consider? Her eyes shone like a galaxy, and as I looked into them, the rejection I had been preparing to say disappeared. I smiled and said, since you're asking so sincerely, I'll reluctantly agree. She smiled back, ignoring my teasing words, and simply followed her heart, embracing me. Willow waited through many lonely winters and summers, believing that next winter, she would no longer be the only one feeling lonely.